and welcome to San Diego Comic-Con. My name is Devin Kogan. I'm a senior writer at Entertainment Weekly, and I am so excited to be here at EW's Comic-Con studio with Paul Dano to talk about his Riddler comic book. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about kind of how this comic came together, and like what was it that most excited you about, exploring this new chapter?
Yeah, so as an actor, sort of one of the main ways that I approach my work is sort of how do I get to page one of the script, meaning I do a lot of backstory work, and the hope is that you're sort of bringing the life of the character with you somehow, and you're having the unconscious of the character at work as well when you're doing a scene. And in this case, with the Batman, I played Edward Nashton, the Riddler. A lot of the backstory I came up with was in the language of comics because I sort of wanted to have that like archetypal energy at work, so to speak, going towards the film. And one night I was on set with Matt Reeves, our director, and I said, my backstory, I saw this image and this image and this image and blah, blah, blah. And he said, that should be a comic. And I secretly had that in mind, that it could be. I don't know if I would have had the sand to go through with it, but the next day on set, Matt Reeves said, I spoke to DC, they want to talk to you. And I said, great. And so I sort of put together my backstory, and now I've started to realize it. And frankly, it's turned into a whole otother thing. It's taken on a life of its own. But I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I know you've talked about how, you're doing all that research and really kind of exploring who he is while you were working on the film. What was, one of your most, unanswered questions that you really wanted to explore with this comic? Or, what were you most excited about him to sort of figure out in this backstory?
Well, I think what I felt like I had to offer to this medium was to give something that almost felt autobiographical for the character as a Batman comic. So do you know what I mean? There's autobiographical graphic novels, which I love, but I thought, can I bring some of that energy to this because I'm so sort of in touch with this character? Can I bring something really sort of psychological and emotional? On the surface, it's about, the plot is sort of about corruption, and there is a plot-driven element, but underneath it, it's kind of an emotional horror story about trauma. So I loved what Matt did in the film about sort of the two sides of trauma, right? Because Bruce Wayne had his own trauma in his childhood, and Edward Nashton did as well. And unfortunately, they go different ways. And so just to sort of play more with the character that I spent so much time cultivating in this world of Gotham that I loved so much. It really is. As a comic book kid, it's a dream.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about the process of actually writing the comics and collaborating with the artists, and what was that process like for you?
Well, it's still going, and it's totally incredible. I feel so lit up by it because I'm learning so much, and I think that's sort of when I'm at my happiest is when I'm really challenged by something and learning and discovering, and so and it's changed each issue. It's going to be 6 issues. And the first one was written sort of fatter because and my artist has helped me, this guy named Stevan Subic, he's a Serbian artist, he's brilliant and wonderful. And I keep each issue learning my own language for comics better. How to distill even more just into one image, telling the story through the panels is not dissimilar to telling the story through a cut in film, but it is a different language. The color language is different. So I feel like it's going to also give back to me as a film artist as well in some way. But it's been in a really intense actually collaboration. It's not just writing some treatment and sending it off. And it's like this guy and I are on Zoom 2 or 3 times a week. We are battling it out about how to tell the story through the panels. We are going through the colors. We're trying to create, something to really give the audience or the reader.
Yeah, I imagine that's such an interesting world to play in, especially, when you're, working on something like the Batman, you're sort of only focused on this one story, his story, versus, you're telling this comic book and you sort of have to think about it holistically. You have to think about every element of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's super subjective, and in fact, the first page starts inside Edward's head and opens audience's eyes and through. So we are really giving a sort of subjective experience of what it's like to be with this struggling young man. But to take the gifts that Matt Reeves and our DP Greg Fraser and our production designer James Chinlund sort of gave in this world that I was in as an actor, and then kind of now create our own thing from that. There's so much artistry that went into that film, and now we kind of get to go do our thing. And I grew up in New York City. Gotham, it feels like a big, beautiful, scary place to me, and I just love it.
I imagine, like, as a writer, that would be such a fun world to be like, okay, I get to explore weird corners of Gotham, whatever I want to write.
It's also, I mean, to write something and then have it realized by a brilliant artist, it's really an amazing feeling. And in this case, we're trying to make this comic like a film in a way, because Stefan and I are so intensely involved in realizing it together. But, he is the production design. He is the costume design. We are that. So there's not, it's just the two of us and our editor, Jim Chadwick, and it's really, quite intense, yeah.
I love that. And was there anything about the process of, making this comic that really surprised you, or that you weren't expecting when you first started doing it?
Well, how long it's taking. I can't really do anything unless I get really into it, and I do need to learn to sort of work at a faster pace sometimes, because I can just get into one thing and stay there for a while. I feel like I'm learning so much about these medium of sequential art that I don't know if I can distill it right now in this moment. But I've loved looking at the medium with such a keen eye now, and the inspiration from all the artists. Like, we're here at Comic-Con right now, and I just met Greg Capullo, and I was talking to Bill Sienkiewicz, and people who, their work, it gives you something. So to just be sort of in dialogue with this medium has been a real gift.
Yeah, were there any particular artists or writers or runs of comics that were you looked at as inspiration?
Well, sort of, yeah. I mean, Matt Reeves' script was a year two story, he called it. So the natural place for this to be was, this is like a year one story. And of course, Frank Miller's comic in some way was important for our film, and this as well. I just got to meet Frank Miller an hour ago, and it was really cool. I don't know if there was, again, I think sort of trying to look at autobiographical comics, which aren't Batman comics, and what I could kind of glean from, as if it was written from that personal, subjective point of view. And then a little bit of horror comics as well, because I think the psychological and emotional elements for this character are a little, horrific.
But sometimes that's fun to play in that horror world.
It is fun. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun to read too. And that's actually, I feel more in touch with those genres after this experience on the Batman and this comic than I ever had, which is really fun. It's opened a new door, to appreciating elements of horror, for example.
So could you see yourself, doing this more in the future? Exploring more comics?
Golly, I don't know at this point. If I would love to, if something gave me the itch that this has, where there's a natural compulsion, I just have to finish this thing and do it, and that's the feeling that you're very lucky when you get that feeling. I hope more so that it'll really go towards directing my next film, and just what have I learned from working on Riddler Year One that I can bring to my next film.
That makes total sense. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this, and thank you all of you at home for watching. Make sure to stay tuned to EW.com through the rest of the weekend for all of our Comic-Con coverage. And thank you so much.
Great, thank you.